So this is really a fun talk for me today. You're here at Velocity. How many people is it your first Velocity? How many people were here at the Velocity in 2008? Well, not here, but at the Velocity in 2008. It was around 2008 it started bubbling, and then Rob Peters this morning from Verizon Edgecast had it in his keynote slide deck. Really 2009 when John and Paul really started to get that thought around DevOps to coalesce. And I'm really proud of Velocity to, I think, have really pushed that notion forward of DevOps. And you can define it different ways, and a lot of people try to define it. To me, it's a lot about, actually a lot of it is kind of common sense stuff about increasing communication and awareness of skills across teams in the organization, certainly dev and ops, but even other parts of the organization. And I think today I'm going to talk about something that I think has already started to really gather a lot of momentum as the next DevOps. For shorthand, I call it D4P, and I'll explain why at the end of the talk. But it's about doing that same thing across two other groups, developers and designers. Developers do a lot of different things, of course, as Steve mentioned in his introduction that he gave me. I work mostly on performance, and so I use performance as the replacement for development there. So today I want to talk about these groups that we have in most companies that develop websites, web applications, designers, and performance engineers or developers, and how it's important to bring those two groups closer together. I use the yin and yang symbol to try to symbolize what we're after here, right? Is these two groups working together and increasing the amount of intersection between what these groups do, what they know, and how they work. So I don't know about you. How many people here build websites or web apps? And keep your hands up. How many of you do not have designers on your team or at your company? Wow. So yeah, most of the time we have designers and developers working together to produce a web application or a website. I don't know about you. I've actually been at companies where that has gone really, really well, but a majority of the time it's more like this, minus the pillows, right? Look at this person in the back, like someone has vaulted them higher. They're like falling over other people. They're very excited about this clash of the developers and designers. A lot of times it is more of an adversarial relationship, right? And it really doesn't have to be that way. I think Astrid talked about this morning. If you step back, is that me beeping? Is someone else beeping? Oh, I forgot to do that in my introduction to Steve. Turn your cell phones off. I don't think that's me beeping. And I will come off the stage and get that phone, whoever phone it is. Take a step back for a second. What are these two groups, developers, performance engineers, designers, what are they really after, right? It's to build a really great, engaging, enjoyable experience. That's what it boils down to. They're both after the same thing. Why is it that at some companies you can get into this kind of adversarial fix-sum game where one group's gain is the other group's loss, right? It really isn't that way. It's more like the yin and the yang, where they are not opposing forces, they're complementary forces. And they really need to learn that and learn how to leverage what they do to work together to achieve the same goal that they're after, this amazing user experience, right? So I actually talked about this a year and a half ago, Velocity New York 2013, with Tim Cadlick. Are you in the room? And Jason Grigsby, and I think Lara Hogan was there as well. And we were talking about how performance was a really important part of design, and how there was some people in the design community, and those folks, especially Jason and Tim, are much more in the design camp than I am. How there were some folks in that design camp talking about performance and really focusing on user experience, but that we needed to increase that. And we talked about strategies to do that, and to some degree we followed through on those strategies, but to a large degree it's been just an organic thing that's happened, so much so that I was at Smashing Conf last month. I spoke there, and I consider Smashing Conf a little bit more on the design side. And luckily, I got to kick it off, and I talked about design and performance working together. And afterward, out of 20 speakers, there were probably 5 more speakers who did the exact same topic. So there's a lot of momentum around this idea of the importance of bringing design and development closer together. And it's one of the reasons why a couple of months ago I joined SpeedCurve. This is my partner, Mark Zeman. He's from Auckland, New Zealand, and this is literally his backyard. It's like a jungle. He comes from a design background, and we talked a lot before. We've known each other for over a year. We talked about SpeedCurve and what his thoughts on performance coming from that design side, and it just really resonated. And that's what we're trying to do with SpeedCurve, is give performance information, the right performance information, to developers and designers so that they can really achieve this shared goal that they have. Mark's actually doing a talk after this in, I forget which room, but another room, talking about very advanced data visualizations. In lieu of Mark being here, I'll borrow slides from Yesenia Perez-Cruz. She's done some great articles and posts and talks on this topic, and she's a designer. I don't come from a design background. So she talks about how she used to be a reckless designer. Now, amazing work, right? These sites are engaging, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing sites. But when she was doing this work, she really hadn't heard much about the performance side of things. And so she admitted, it was just a lack of awareness. And sometimes these sites were not what we would call high performance. I don't know about you, if you have a 2-minute page load time, you should worry. And I think the 136 requests, I blocked out the size. It was like 10 meg or something like that. There it is, 6 meg. Just a really, really heavy site. Was that her goal? No, her goal, again, was to build this really engaging, enjoyable experience. And it was just this lack of awareness. And that's what, for dev and ops, that's what DevOps is about. For design and performance, that's what D4P is about, is fostering that awareness. And Yesenia has that awareness now, and that's what the point of her talk is. She talks about performance budgets and some other things that I'll talk about in a minute. So it's funny that isn't part of the thought everywhere today, because we know, or at least folks from Velocity know, that performance is really important, not just for the user, but also for the business. So we know, if you've been coming to Velocity, you know all these studies or reading the blogs. Bing showed that a site that's 2 seconds slower for search has a 4% drop in revenue per user, plus all these other goodness metrics drop off. Kyle Rush from the Obama campaign did a very great controlled experiment or launch, where he made the site 60% faster and donations increased 14%. And just last month, Google announced that the whole mobile-geddon thing, I promised myself I wasn't going to say that anymore. Google announced, just like they did for AdWords in 2007 and desktop PageRank about 3 years ago, now for mobile PageRank in Google search, that if your site isn't fast and the content, the design isn't laid out appropriately for different screen sizes, then you're going to get dinged when it comes to PageRank. Okay, so quick recap. I haven't gone too fast, but let's just revisit. Often, hopefully not at your company, but at a lot of places I've been, often designers and developers work in silos. There isn't this cross-pollination that we'd like to see. The result of that is sometimes we get these designs that are very heavy, and it's hard to make them high-performant like we'd like. And yet we know that being fast is important. Hopefully we're all on the same page with these 3 points. So I'm going to talk about this and how to attack this. So when it comes to getting this cross-pollination, this D4P to happen, here are some tips. First, if you don't have the right people on the team, it's not going to happen. So you have to make sure you have the right people, and you have to make sure, this is the main thing, is that they're working together from the very beginning. So you don't want to start by having, say, marketing and design sit down, come up with a product concept, scope that out, do some Photoshop mock-ups or something like that, and then pull in the developers. That's not going to work, and that's where you get this kind of head-butting or fix-some game problem, where some people in the organization have gotten anchored, they have some emotional ties to one design, and then you bring in other people who don't have that background, that history of how this design came about, and they talk about other issues and they try to move those anchors away, and that brings sometimes frustration, anger, reluctance at a minimum. And so it's really important to have the right people and have them working together from the very beginning. If design people understand some technical challenges that are going to come up, that's great. And if developers understand the motivation from a product or marketing or user perspective for certain things, they're going to have an increased understanding of the product that they're working on. That's important from both directions. When you're doing these discussions early on, it's really important as you're talking about the product and the marketing and the goals and the users to set some guiding principles. And certainly, from my perspective, I love performance. Performance has to be a big part of those guiding principles. And the people in this room, if you follow this advice, it's your responsibility to make sure performance is addressed. I really like specifics. I feel like this is pretty hand-wavy. So here's a specific that Mark had from his work as a creative director at a design agency. This is one of the examples of guiding principles that came out of their work with a New Zealand news website, where their main guideline was speed is more important than design embellishment. In this case, this entire website was built from a mobile perspective of people reading snippets of news articles while they're waiting for the train or waiting for the bus or standing in line for coffee. So it was really, really important for it to be fast, so much so that they actually quantified that as part of their guiding principles. And we've seen other examples, including this morning, of ways that you can articulate that and quantify that. More specific, the better. Another suggestion for D4P is start working on the prototype as early as possible, right? And avoid that in a silo Photoshop design style process. So instead of designers working on an entire markup, they're working on assets that are going to be integrated to the prototype as early as possible. You're going to have content specialists creating samples of content. Maybe that's stubbed out behind an API, and you can integrate that into the prototype early. And this is another way that you get the entire team working together from the very beginning. Another thing to do from the beginning is measure performance from the very start. It doesn't mean optimize from the very start, but track things and know early on where you are, where you're likely to have problems, what the cause of those problems are. So that's really important. And when you have those guiding principles and you set up those metrics early on, you can set up performance budgets. This is an idea, again, that Tim Catlick is famous for, and I think he was cited a couple times this morning. This is a dashboard from SpeedCurve where you can see this website. I don't know who it is. One of our customers is actually having a challenging time. Early on and just recently, they were able to dip into the good green color of their performance budget for start render, but largely they're fighting that, especially most recently. So it's really good to set up these budgets. That doesn't necessarily have to be part of the guiding principles, but as part of the execution of that principle, you can set up these performance budgets and make sure that you're tracking them. Another thing to do if you're tracking these metrics is make sure that people on the team see them very easily and constantly. This is a slide, I think I've got the URL down there, from Laura Hogan from Etsy, where of course they do tremendous work on, I have to see when I'm supposed to be done. Okay, there we go, I'm on schedule. Where, of course, Etsy does tremendous work when it comes to performance and user experience, where they have this, they're probably detecting if your IP address is within the corporate firewall, and if so, they're showing you this extra bit of metrics information as the employees and developers of the company are actually dogfooding the website. They can see like how fast it is, and in this case, we know the golden rule, the 80-20 rule. Normally your back end should only be 10 or 20%. Here there was some egregious slowdown in the back end blue part of the bar, and then they actually have a budget on that. They call it an SLA, where it's called out that this page violates their back end SLA, their back end budget. The back end took way too long for some reason. And if a developer sees this, or even if someone else in the company sees this, they can take a screenshot and they can give it to a developer and try to track down exactly what went wrong there because they exceeded their budget. So these in-page reminders I've seen, of course we had these at Google, I've seen these at a lot of places. It works really, really well. Usually if you've set up metrics, you have a lot of data being gathered in the browser and being beaconed to your metrics data warehouse somewhere. I always find that it's really good to figure out a way to expose all of that metrics beacon data that you're sending back, expose it in the page itself so that developers, if they notice something is going wrong, they can do some Easter egg keyboard command or something to see all of that data and try to drill down and diagnose what's going on more easily. I find the best way to do this, what I love, is bookmarklets. So every company I've been at, we have data that we're gathering in the browser and we're eventually beaconing back. I always write a bookmarklet really early on so that people can open that bookmarklet and see all of the data that we're gathering in the browser for their current session. So I've talked a bit about metrics, but not specific metrics. And I really want to focus on that for this second half of the talk. So I think we all know, we've talked about this for the last couple of years here at Velocity. We've had people talk about it. Here's an article I wrote. Our industry, working on web performance, is anchored on page load time. That is the industry standard for measuring performance. And hopefully everyone in this room knows that page load time is not highly correlated to a fast, enjoyable user experience, right? So we need to move away from window on load, from page load time. Quick example to hammer that home of two very, very popular websites. So let's start with Gmail. We probably all use it. The onload fired, in this case, these results are from webpagetest.org, fired at 3.9 seconds, right? Is the page ready? Is this a good measure of the user experience? No. None of the data that the user wants is visible to them. So if you're tracking onload, it's not until 4.7 seconds, nearly a second later, that most of the content above the fold, someone gave me a hard time on Twitter for saying above the fold, I mean in the viewport. Most of the content in the viewport isn't there until a second later. So if you were measuring your performance based on onload, in this case for Gmail, that metric is giving you too rosy of a picture. It's overly optimistic. It's telling you 3.9 seconds, but it's actually 4.7. You can't believe that onload metric. That's not what you should be using. On the flip side, Amazon, right? I don't know about you. I think Amazon pages are, kind of heavy, right? There's a lot of content in there, cross-selling and recommendations and all that, reviews. I love that stuff, but oh my God, this page is so bloated. Yeah, but you know what? That above the fold content, that rendered at 2 seconds. I'm sorry, not above the fold. No one, put Twitter away, please. That content in the viewport, I got to take that out of there. That content in the viewport, 2 seconds. Are you kidding me? That's amazing. And onload doesn't fire until 9.7 because there is all that other stuff below the fold. But if we care about the user experience, then 2 seconds is a much better approximation for what the user's reaction level of enjoyment is to this website. But if they're tracking it with page load time, they're going to be bummed out. It's too critical, right? 9.7 does not correlate to the user enjoyment level of this page, right? So if you're using page load time as your main performance metric, stop. Okay, what should you use instead? So we need to find some other metrics, some that are more highly correlated to user experience, right? We might not be able to hit it right bullseye. Someone saw this slide and they said, why didn't you get a shot that had it in the bullseye? I said, well, we're not going to, probably until we get implants in the brain, we're probably not going to be able to exactly bullseye the user's perception of enjoyment of this website, but we can get a lot closer than where we are now. Now with page load time, we're in that outer ring all the way out there where you only get double points or whatever it is. So we all love webpagetest.org. Hopefully I'm not assuming anything there. Everyone in the room is using it, loves it. And I love web page test. It is the best performance tool in the world. Just, a slight ding. It's been around for so long. If you look, the first metric it shows, just from a historical perspective, it's been there from the very beginning, even before start rendered speed index, is page load time. That's the first one that's shown. That just shows how entwined it is into the performance view of websites. Really, though, Pat has done an amazing job of pioneering alternative metrics that we should be paying more attention to. Here he's got start render. Start render is going to tell me when the first pixel got painted. And it might be the first pixel got painted and then nothing else got painted for 8 seconds. So it's a good one to use. It's better than page load time. But speed index is really a better one. What's speed index? There's a URL you can go to and you can read about this function that has curvy lines in it, which really scares me. Here's a way I think of it. Pat explained it to me this way. If you looked at a timeline from 0 to whatever the page load time is, across that timeline, more and more pixels are going to get painted, right? Initially, there's no pixels painted, and then that start render is going to happen, and you're going to start getting more and more pixels. And then finally, all the pixels will have been painted at least once. Speed index is the time at which the 50th percentile pixel got painted, the median pixel got painted. And so it's like a median time for pixels, for rendering. So it would be great to have histograms, and we'll show later some other things that give you more visual information about the rendering experience. But if you can only look at one number, speed index is a great representation for the overall rendering experience of the website. And that's really what we have to focus on. We have to focus on not the mechanics of the browser. When did onload fire? How long did it take for the HTML document to get down? How long did it take for the jQuery script to get down? We really need to care about the user experience and what the user is seeing. So, of course, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Web page test, this is speed curve again, but all these film strips we got out of web page test, we just put them all together for you in one nice display. Film strips is another thing that Pat pioneered in web page test. Here we're showing the This is actually a great dashboard to look at if you care about the Google mobile search thing. We've got the exact same page. I think it's Guardian. I can't tell who it is. Rendered in different viewport sizes. And if you hover over them, you can see all the different viewport sizes. So here in one place, you can see the speed at which you're delivering the content visually. When did it happen? And you can also look at the content. If the site was not responsive, up there at the top on these little 320 by 480 viewport sizes, you'd see really, really tiny links. And Google is going to ding you on that. That is not the layout that you can have, the design that you can have on a small screen size. So these pictures, again, like you can look at speed index, one number. If that's all you have time for or room for, that's great. These film strips, oh my gosh, tell so much information. Put all your competitors next to yourself right there and see what that looks like. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 1,000,000 words. So we can look at Amazon and Gmail loading next to each other. Amazon's done. I'm still waiting for Gmail. It pretty much loaded, but that pesky chat widget, and there it is, okay. Quite a bit longer. Again, put yourself and your competitors next to each other in a video. Very, very telling about what the user experience is like. And now I'm going to deep dive on one specific thing that I think is really, really important. It's a problem. It happens a lot, and it's fixable. So we should pay attention to it. It's hero images. So we have a lot of beautiful websites today that have massive hero images. Even a product page has a hero image. It's much smaller. It's the picture of the shoe, and there's lots of other. It doesn't take up the whole page. But certainly these sites, Jawbone in this case, huge image that really makes the site, right? But if we look at the film strip across different viewport sizes, it's not till 2 or 3.5 seconds that we see that hero image. That's a long time to wait. That's too long for the user to wait, right? I call this HID, hero image delay. I did this talk before, and I literally got a tweet that said, I found the talk informative, but the use of the creation of a superfluous acronym really took away from the value of the presentation. To be honest, I kind of did this tongue-in-cheek. I agree, we don't need more acronyms. I thought it was kind of, because the hero image is hid. I don't know, I thought it was kind of funny. I'm not expecting, this is not my legacy or anything, but. So let's look, this is the speed curve waterfall chart. My partner has done a lot of work on here. Now, as you scroll horizontally through the timeline of the waterfall chart, you can actually see what rendering is going on at that point. So we see it about 2.6 seconds. That's when that image comes into play. If we go back here, if you looked at this and you say, yeah, that hero image, whoa, it's really coming in late. How big is it? I bet it's really big. We could look at our CDN. I bet it takes a long time to download. Well, it's just the price we have to pay for these beautiful images. Look at this. Are you kidding me? There's the hero image. It only took 500 milliseconds to deliver? It's all this. How come it didn't display right away? It took 500 milliseconds to deliver that thing, but it didn't show up until 2.6 seconds. What was that all that other 2.1 about? We had, in fact, even after the image was downloaded, it still was more than half a second before it got rendered to the screen. And after the HTML document got downloaded, which contains the reference to the image, it was still 6.5 seconds before the image even got requested. It turns out in this case, the orange and green are JavaScript and CSS. All of that is blocking the image from downloading and rendering, right? Here's another great one, HomeAway. There was someone from HomeAway I spoke about. We would love to sign you up as a speed curve customer. Again, this is a very prevalent problem, so not singling you out. 2 to 3.5 seconds again before this beautiful hero image comes in and is rendered. And certainly you can look at it. Without the hero image, I don't know about you, if I was taken up to the point where I saw everything except the hero image, like even the form. I'm going to think the site's broken. I'm certainly not going to start looking for rental properties that I can pay money for on a site that looks like that, right? So they're suffering from this problem as well. You think, okay, well, it's a really big, heavy image. No, it's not. There's the hero image. In fact, look, it took I don't even know, what is that, 60 milliseconds to download it? It's blocked by all this other JavaScript and CSS being downloaded in the page. And here's the final one. We'll dig into this one a little bit more. Airbnb, again, beautiful property images. It's a little faster, 1.5 to 3 seconds before you see it. But it's the same problem. You think, oh, it's a big, heavy image, that's why. No, it's not. There's the hero image. It downloaded pretty quickly. But it was delayed almost 700 milliseconds between when the download finished and when it got displayed. Let's dig into this one. Again, it's because of JavaScript and CSS. In this case, it's just JavaScript. But it reveals an interesting behavior of all browsers today, and that is the preloader. Okay, so here's their document source, right? Oh, I am going to have to go faster. Here's their document source. Notice the bottom body, the closed body, closed HTML. We're at the last 10 lines of their HTML document. And we've got these 4 scripts. Memorize all these numbers. Chris, you memorize 3C90. You memorize. Just remember that. Okay, you don't have to remember the numbers. I'll highlight them later. These are all at the very, very bottom of the page. And you might have seen people love tweeting when I say this. That was a best practice I espoused in 2007. It's not appropriate. It doesn't work anymore. Putting your scripts at the bottom of the page, at least this way, where they're synchronous, doesn't work. Because look what happens. The preloader will scan your HTML document, the entire thing. It will find script tags, and all the browsers today give scripts a higher priority for downloading. So even though there are images, IMG tags, like hero images, higher up in the page, that hero image is going to get a lower download priority than these scripts. So look at these scripts, these 4 scripts that are at the bottom of the page, a page that has about 60 requests. Where do they actually get downloaded? There are those 4 scripts. One of them is the 3rd request, 5th request, 6th request, 9th request. All 4 of those at the very bottom of the page are in the top 10 downloads of the waterfall chart because of the preloader. The preloader is awesome. Overall, it's awesome. But if you have hero images, you probably, and especially if you put those scripts at the bottom, you've kind of said, yeah, these don't matter that much. And yet they're delaying probably the most important resource in that page, that hero image. So really, when it comes to scripts, oh, and you think, well, they don't add up to that much. It's only 238K. Yeah, but that's gzipped. Ungzipped, it's 800K of JavaScript that has to be, once it's the 238K is downloaded, it's ungzipped and it has to be parsed and executed, a huge amount of JavaScript. And that's what's blocking this image from rendering, because the image won't be rendered by the browser until all the JavaScript is downloaded, parsed, and executed, right? Okay, so speed index, if you need a general metric, is the best metric you can use, but it's still a general metric. And all of our pages, not all the pixels in the page, in your page, have the same value. So you really need to implement custom metrics. It's the number 1 takeaway from the talk. You have to define, and you probably, hopefully, as part of this D for P process, in that early staging, we'll figure out what are the most important parts of this product that you're building. Define those most important design elements in the page. They might map very closely to DOM elements. Measure when those most important elements appear in the page using the user timing API. And then you can track that in your run products like Impulse and your synthetic products like SpeedCurve. I have a sweater that I'll show you later that says SpeedCurve on it. So let's dig into this a little bit. Custom metrics. Probably the most important custom metric article that really got us thinking about this was the one from Twitter about 3 years ago, where they said their most important metric when it came to performance, that shows you how far ahead of the game they were, 3 years ago, time to first tweet, not page load time, not speed index, time to first tweet. When you're looking at your timeline, how long does it take Twitter to get that first tweet to render on the page? How would you measure that? Seems pretty straightforward, but how would you measure that? Hey, did I skip one? Oh, okay. I think I skipped one, but that's okay. How would you measure that? It seems pretty easy. How many people here think they could figure out when an image got displayed to the screen? I guess I set that up poorly. It turns out, I thought, oh, this can't be that hard. And it was really hard. So I created this test page where it has an image, that's little starfish, and it has a script at the top that takes 3 seconds to download, and a style sheet at the top that takes 5 seconds to download. Why did I pick those two? We know that scripts and style sheets block rendering on the page. They block images from appearing. I want to see if I have a problematic script CSS situation like this, how is it going to affect the rendering, the display of that image, right? I know what the source of truth is. I know that the image actually displays a little after 5 seconds. How do I know that? I used web page test, and web page test has these awesome film strip views. So I ran this on every browser, and on every browser it was like 5.2 seconds. So we know the source of truth. 5.2 is the correct answer. Let's look, and then I thought, well, okay, I've got some candidate ways of measuring this. I emailed a bunch of other gurus in the industry, and they said, well, how about Mutation Observer? How about this? So I tried all 5 of them. The first one I thought of was, let's use resource timing, right? If it's supported in the browser. Well, here, if I use resource timing, it tells me that this image was done from resource timing's perspective, get entries by name, duration, at 1.5 seconds. We know that's too fast. The real answer we want is close to 5.2. So it's not that resource timing is buggy, it's just answering a different question. Resource timing tells you how long did it take for the resource to download. We're trying to measure when it got displayed. So this gives us a good answer for download, not display. We could look at the image onload handler. That tells us 3 seconds. That's too fast. We could try Mutation Observer. Same thing. It tells us 3 seconds. That's too fast. And you could, I've just got code snippets here. You could download you see the URL up there. You could look at that. And I blogged about this too. We could do image polling, where every 100 milliseconds we check if the image's offset height has changed, because that tells us that it got rendered. Too optimistic. It tells us 3.2 seconds. It turns out the only technique that works is actually very simple. After the image tag, just put an inline script that takes a time measurement at that point. And that's going to tell us in this case, 3 seconds. So it's the closest way to measure when an image actually gets displayed. We're almost done. In this case, the image was really fast. In the previous case, the image was really fast. It was the scripts and style sheets that were slow. Let's flip it. Let's make the image slower than the scripts and style sheets. In that case, it really takes about 7 seconds before this gets displayed. So the inline script gets executed before the image is actually rendered. It's either resource timing or image onload that is giving us an accurate time for the image rendering in this situation. So really what we have is we have 2 different scenarios we have to worry about. Slow blocking resources or the actual slow image. So all we have to do is measure both and take the max of those 2. So now this is the way to add custom metrics to your website for design elements that you care about. Whether it's a hero image or a product image, it's most likely going to be an image in the page, and now we have a technique for measuring that accurately. And the cool thing is, if you do this using the user timing API, which I showed briefly but didn't talk about too much, it will show up in most popular tools for both RUM and synthetic. This is SpeedCurve, also in web page tests. You can see this is an actual customer that has these custom metrics. We pick them up automatically. They don't have to do any custom integration with us. Same thing, this is a chart from Impulse. Google Analytics, a couple other of the RUM products will automatically show you your user timing metrics. So that's the beautiful thing about a standard, a web standard, is everyone can get behind it and adopt it. So now we've gone full circle. We've talked about the importance of bringing design and development closer together. and identifying what's important on the page, and then the technical details that I love of actually quantifying that, measuring that, and tracking that. So the takeaways: figure out what matters the most to your users on your page. Focus, when you're thinking about that, on what the user experience is and how you're going to measure that. And implement the custom metrics so that you can track that over time. If this is something that makes sense to you, you like the way this is, then I recommend that you buy the inspiration for my D4P acronym, Laura Hogan's book, Designing for Performance. That's it. Thank you very much. I ran over, so I'm going to stop now. If you have any questions, I'll be right up here. Just come on up and ask them. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.